Welcome to the Language Alchemy podcast, where we transform how you communicate to create the life and relationships you truly want. I'm your host, Alejandra Siroka, and I help multicultural individuals, couples, and change makers move beyond surface level politeness and conflict avoidance to have authentic, value-based interactions that actually resolve issues and deepen connection. If you are tired of rehashing conversations in your head, walking on eggshells, or feeling misunderstood in your most important relationships, this podcast will give you a new way forward. And if you've been thinking about getting support with your communication, visit languagealchemy.com to find out which transformative communication programs is most beneficial for you. Today, I have a treat for you because we are going to talk about something that Giovanna, one of our listeners, has been requesting for many months. And that is how to talk about marketing in alignment with our values. I have a special guest with us today. Her name is Justine Chang. She is a messaging strategist, a brand storyteller, and a copywriter who helps equity-driven women founders and leaders craft bold, value-aligned messaging and is the founder of Red Balloon Station. She blends strategy, storytelling, cultural insight to uncover the diamonds in your story so that your brand builds trust, moves people to action, and reflects the future you are building. And speaking of building future, Justine and I met because we're both building the kind of future we want to see in the world. We are both part of a business program for thought leaders, the Thought Leadership Collective. We had a one-on-one conversation and we could not stop talking about this topic, language and marketing. So I thought, Justine, you need to be here at the Language Alchemy podcast. And I'm so grateful you said yes. So welcome to the Language Alchemy podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Alejandra. When we were talking, and even just hearing you speak in our meetings, I was thinking, wow, she really speaks my language.
Oh, I'm so glad. Well, let's dive in and let's talk about marketing. We're all exposed to marketing all the time. I'm thinking social media, TV, radio, what other ways?
Yeah, everything like billboards, bus stops. We see it everywhere. And even I think of my son's school, there's flyers everywhere, banners for the after school programs, sports. Marketing is everywhere. And it's such an important part of creating culture, influencing culture, and how we think and see things. So when we talk about the importance of language, I think something that's gotten lost in traditional marketing is that care for what kind of culture are we truly creating? Because especially in today's world where we have influencers selling all kinds of things, we've developed this culture of over-consumerism, and it feels like we're always having to sell or be sold to. And the funny thing is, when I talk to other entrepreneurs, so often people say, oh, I don't like marketing. I feel so icky, or I don't want to do that. And so for a few years now, I've been saying marketing needs a rebrand because marketing, if you think about it, the things we're used to and the things we're taught, you know this, Alejandra, being in business and having a successful business, we're taught to create urgency and scarcity and create FOMO. And if you ever think, just saying those words makes my nervous system uneasy, right? And so
Absolutely. And for those who may not know, because we have people listening from around the world and who may not know what FOMO is, because in the US, we use so many acronyms. FOMO is the fear of missing out. And I agree. I can't tell you how many newsletters or text messages, because now I get a lot of marketing on text telling me, if you don't buy this within the next 10 minutes, the price is going to go up, or you need this before this season or else. And there's always some kind of language that creates urgency, scarcity, and then the idea that something bad is going to happen if you don't do it.
Yeah. It's not a nice feeling, actually. I think with that and marketing being such an integral part of our lives, because that is how we learn about things too, different products, different services, programs. I think there's a kinder way to do it. I like to reframe marketing as relationship building, because that's really what we're doing, is building a relationship. Sure, there are brands out there and businesses that just want to sell. They don't care. They're just moving product. But especially for those of us, and a lot of my clients are much more conscientious of how they're putting themselves out there and the language that they're using. I like to remind folks that when we are here to have a positive impact and to create a world and culture that we want to live in, that we want to pass down, we have to remember the relationship. So something I've been talking a lot more about recently is the idea that instead of all these pressure tactics, to think about harming less and honoring consent. Because if you think about those pressure tactics, it's actually very violating. It's not allowing us consent. It's like kind of being in an abusive relationship, because you're being pressured to make these decisions and being told, like you were saying earlier, if you don't buy now, you're going to miss out. And if you pay attention to some of the brands, some folks, they will say, oh, this is like last chance to get buy one, get one free. And then they actually do this sale regularly. So then it's not a true urgency. And there's certainly ways to communicate limited capacity, or there is a deadline. There's a difference between pressuring people and setting boundaries, and also just being truthful. And so I always tell folks to just be truthful. I know when I put out my own offers, I only have capacity to do so many. And I have to remind myself that, because I have a tendency to just open it up and take on everyone. But I have to remind myself that, okay, I can actually only do 5 of these this month or something. And that's okay. That's just having an honest conversation. And again, setting boundaries. So I think it's important to think of marketing as a relationship with the other person and what they want, what's good for them, a consensual relationship, but also think of yourself and what honors your own values and, again, boundaries.
You are pretty much saying that marketing is language.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
The way we build relationships, the way we develop relationships, the way we maintain healthy, thriving, meaningful relationships is through the language we speak. I usually talk about the power of language to harm or to heal, to divide or to bring us together. So you are talking about really paying attention to that language of scarcity or urgency and how harmful that is, because it imposes something on us. It doesn't feel good in our nervous system when we receive it. There's a sense of like, stop breathing there. You hold your breath, because if you don't do this, you're going to miss out, or something bad is going to happen. You're not going to have the latest XYZ. And you're talking about thinking about consensus, equality, thinking about your needs and your capacity, as well as what could help somebody else, and using that language. But of course, in order to use that language, you need to have the intention to have a relationship, to build that relationship, to foster that relationship, and then to know who your audience is, so that you know what their needs are and what you can offer that could be helpful to them.
Exactly.
When you are thinking about a more consensual approach or a less harmful approach to marketing that doesn't really stress our nervous system out, what are the things that you are thinking about when you are working with one of your clients and helping them have that kind of marketing that's caring, that's relationship building, and that's not harmful?
I think about invitation, welcoming them in, and I think about empowering them with knowledge, with education, so they can make the decision on whether to say yes to what you're offering. Again, if we think about healthy relationships, and I know you talk about this all the time, it's keeping those things in mind. What's going to make my audience feel invited into my world, and also creating that world, like setting the rules of your world, not just for them, but also for yourself. When I work with clients at early stages and we're developing their brand voice and their brand story, that's what we're creating. We're not just talking about how you sound and the specific words you use. Yes, that's part of it, but it's really like, what is the world you're creating and what are you inviting people into? And then how are you guiding them through the journey, through your world, so that at each step, they feel welcome, they feel invited in, they feel included in the conversation, not just like you talking at them, you really empowering them with knowledge. Because I'm a big believer in the more you educate people, the more they can make a clear and intelligent decision for themselves. Understanding the relationship you're building and wanting to build, and really thinking about your values. What are your values? Are your words aligned with your values? I check myself like, wait, am I saying this in a way that aligns with my values? Especially in our world of social media these days, we've just gotten used to kind of saying whatever is on our mind and people have no filter. But again, it's knowing what your boundaries are, what your audience's boundaries are.
You are saying there reminds me of teaching. One of our professors said, when you are teaching, when you are in front of a group, you are the one who's guiding others. And therefore, you are taking of the group of students. You show up in a way that your students do not have to take care of the leader. Because when that happens, a different dynamic occurs that's not healthy. In marketing, when I see people sharing quote unquote vulnerable posts and they are either saying whatever is in their minds that's unfiltered and that can be harmful, but sometimes they're sharing things that are unintegrated yet. And if this is what they're teaching or if this is what they're offering, then it invites the audience to have to kind of like take care of them.
I agree with, being the guide and like taking care of the audience. Very much so, because you're inviting them into your world and you're asking them to come into your world. Think of it as being a good host, being a good teacher. My oldest son is in kindergarten right now. The teacher sets the tone for the classroom and the whole relationship with the parents and how we work together to support our kids. I very much agree with what you're saying. And then also think of walking alongside your customer or client.
Thank you for saying that, because I'm thinking about instances in which, as you know, I have a weekly newsletter.
Yeah.
And I share both what I have already worked in my communication as well as what I am thinking about, reflecting on, and working on my communication, including when I myself communicate unskillfully and how I repair that. Yeah. And I usually tell my audience, I am going to be a student of communication until my last breath.
Yeah. I think that's important in our work too, is to always be students. And that's something I think with traditional marketing, we forget. It's like we have to be the authority, which forces people to think that they have to be perfect in their words or perfect in how they show up. But I believe there's like perfectly imperfect. I think we need to be able to be human, make mistakes, and own up to them and learn alongside our audience too. When I work with my clients, I think, oh, you know what? That was actually really good. I should apply that to my own messaging. Sometimes it just comes out differently when we are working with someone else and versus with ourselves. So I like what you said is like being a lifelong student. What you do is amazing. You share so much of your experience and knowledge with language in a way that I've never seen anyone else do. And it does feel like a conversation with you. Oh, that's a really good idea.
Thank you. I know you're on my mailing list.
Yeah. I'm always like, oh, yeah. And replying with little notes. I also like to think of it as like big sister energy, that like big sister who looks out for you. I'm an eldest daughter, but it really comes down to relationships, which is, I know, a lot of what you talk about too, and how language is our relationship bridge, because it's how we communicate. It's how we understand each other, learn about each other. And something else I want to add, you always talk about the power of language. And one of my favorite quotes is from Margaret Atwood, the author. And she says, a word after word after word is power. And me, as like a self-proclaimed word nerd, I do see the power in the words we choose. A lot of the things we know today, like the phrases or even slang, sometimes we don't realize where they come from. And especially in the States, there's actually a lot of common phrases that are rooted in harm, that are rooted in racism, sexism. And so it's hard to know all these things. And if you use a common phrase that you later learn, oh, that's not such a good word to use or phrase to use, or at least know the history of it. I think that's something we can do more of too, is like, wait, where does this saying come from? It's really helpful, especially when we want to be conscientious of our words, right? And sometimes it's not about ditching the words completely once we know their history, but it's understanding the history and the context, knowing how it's evolved too, and that we use it more mindfully.
Yes.
And I think as we grow more into ourselves with each year, sometimes we also find, you know what, that doesn't feel right anymore to me, right? And as you mentioned, like I work with namely equity-driven women. And one example I want to share is that there used to be this sense of let's build our empires, that sort of energy. But one day I was sitting with a client and we realized we don't want to use that word actually, because so many empires were built on slavery, the marginalization of different communities. And it's actually not that nice like visual when you think about what actually happens in history when people are truly building empires. But I also don't judge people when they still say that, because I know their intention is like, yes, I'm going to build something amazing.
Yes. And I think that's where you and I differ, because I really move away from any language like that is imperialistic, or you see in marketing sometimes like conquer your dreams, crush your goals, kill it. And I move away from the language of war, because I do believe that the more we're using, the more that we're using that language of war in how, as you were saying, language shifts culture, and marketing is language, and marketing shifts culture. I want to move to a culture of peace.
Yes.
Not more
no,
wars.
I'm with you on that. Personally, when I'm doing my work and with my clients, that is what we move away from. What I mean is, recently I saw someone say that again, and I was like, oh, maybe we don't want to say that. But I understand she doesn't mean harm, but that's just another signal of like, that's where we can evolve with language.
Yes.
And I'm totally with you, because so much of our language is full of violence. So, I am personally very conscientious of that as well, especially raising little kids in the United States.
I agree. It's not about shaming people or pointing fingers. I don't think that's a way that we're going to get into a more equitable world. But it is, I think, about being more conscious about the origin of language, the impact of language, and what we are perpetuating with language. So one thing that I do not use in marketing that is ubiquitous, I see it everywhere, is VIP. I do not believe that someone is a very important person because they have greater ability to pay, because they have more money.
Yeah.
And I was considering working with a coach, and the coach was offering something. And then if you were a VIP, then you would get access to her notes or something like that. And of course, you had to pay more for that. And I thought, oh, so I'm not a very important person to you unless I have more money. Are we valuing human beings based on their ability to pay? I thought about that and reflected on that for a long time, Justine, and decided, no, to me, every single human being is equally valuable just because they are here. They are in the world. And therefore, they're not more important or very important because they can pay me more or they can pay me less.
You make such a good point, because it's funny. People are always talking about VIP days now, especially like in the coaching and consulting world. And I hadn't actually put the language to it until now with you saying that. But I do remember like feeling and thinking like this feels off, like something doesn't feel right in that language. You pointed out something important, which is we need to think about how certain words and how we talk about things make us feel. Because if it doesn't feel good to us, then we should reflect on, maybe something's not right here and we might try a shift.
My listener, who is a service provider and she offers healing modalities, Giovanna asked me, Giovanna, I hope you're enjoying this episode. Her question was, what is the language I can use to attract the kind of people that I'm really joyful to serve?
Okay.
I think a lot of people in the healing modalities don't know what kind of language to use to have the kind of clients that they want to have. What would you say to someone like her?
It's less about specific language and more about first really knowing who you are. I have a feeling for Giovanna, you probably already know internally what your values are, what your boundaries are. And if not, take the time to sit down and think, what are your highest values right now? What matters to you most? This is where in my work, we do like deep sort of identity work, really knowing who you are, but also who you want to serve. Because if you think about like the people you love working with, the people you love serving and helping, just talk to them. You probably know how to talk to them already. And I think we overthink how to talk to people, because I've seen so often now, actually, even people I know who are successful or who have great businesses, but especially with AI now, they're losing their voices because they're relying too much on AI. Sometimes we'll put my words into AI to say like, hey, how would you clean this up a little bit? And I'll look at it. But often AI takes out my voice, right? Or it takes out the important details or the way I would say certain things. And so we have to be really careful with that, because I think AI can help to a certain degree and with certain things. Like I love how AI organizes things. The thing with AI is it does sound more human these days, and it doesn't totally sound like a robot. But at the same time, AI just learns from repetition, right? So it's just making everyone sound the same. And so what I write things the way you would say it. Oftentimes when I'm working with clients, people default to what they think is professional sounding or how they've been trained to write. Like we were all trained to write certain ways in school. I know in undergrad, I had to learn how to write academic papers. In law school, I had to learn how to write another way. And all of it is like to meet somebody else's standard of what is acceptable. But when I'm working with clients, often when they're trying to figure out how to say something, I'll ask them to explain. And so many times I'll say, just say it how you just told me. And that feels the most natural and authentic. And then really think about your audience. So again, what I recommend is thinking of one person. So when you're speaking to your audience, you're speaking to this one person. And this is where everyone freaks out because they say, oh no, am I going to exclude people? But the more specific you are, the more you actually invite people in, because what will come through are your values, what you clearly offer, and what it's like being in your world. And that's what people buy into. I know we've said this already. I generally serve equity-driven women of color, women leaders, entrepreneurs. But at the end of last year, I actually signed 2 straight white male clients. And one of them specifically said, I saw your website and I said, you. He just aligned with my values and what I stand for. So again, at first, it's not so much the specific language that you want to focus on, but more like, who are you? Who are you for? What do you stand for? And also, who are you not for? You can be very clear about that. And people will come to you because your message resonates with them.
You're reminding me of in one of my podcast episodes, and I've given this example before. I would say something like, there you are, you're walking towards your car, you're about to go to work, you're running a little late, you have your turmeric tea in your hand. And then you bump into something and all of a sudden that turmeric is on your, and I specifically say that turmeric tea because I know that's what my client drinks.
Yes.
I'm not saying red wine or soda or
just like beverage,
Getting to know that client and someone who may drink turmeric tea to go to work. I already know like they are interested in wellness and wholesomeness, not drinking something that's going to cause inflammation. They're interested in regulating their nervous system. So I already know so much about why that turmeric tea. By the way, I drink turmeric tea too.
Yeah.
So it's easy for me to talk about it because I know what it does on your throat.
It's funny you say that because like I don't drink coffee and people always ask for coffee chats. So I'll always say virtual tea instead because that's what I drink, Like you're saying, with those just little tweaks, sometimes you just find like, oh, yes, this person also likes tea or this person also drinks this. And there's like an immediate connection, right? So specificity, and it's something I've been saying more and more recently is it's not always in those like bigger, more sparkly words. It's in those just little details that might seem unimportant, but feel very real.
One of your areas of expertise with marketing that is so compelling, it's about telling stories.
Yes.
So do you want to tell us a little bit about how can we tell stories that are in alignment with our values and that can connect with the audience and can help them decide whether what you're offering is something that could be beneficial for them?
Yeah. So first, storytelling is the vehicle for the message, right? And messaging is the meaning of the story. And then marketing, I still have like mixed feelings about the word marketing myself. Yeah. But marketing is really, again, the whole relationship building. And it's also the selling. This is what we are advertising. This is what we're putting ourselves out as. But messaging and storytelling are that vehicle that drives the deeper connection. So
I love the idea of changing the word marketing. Maybe we could call it relationship building.
I know. I've been toying with some ideas.
Yeah, because when we are building a relationship, maybe instead of the selling is the invitation, right? You invite someone out. You invite them out for tea, coffee, go for a hike.
Yeah. And something like, actually, my business coach, who you know, Carissa Begonia.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So I say, stop thinking of it as selling, but like, how are you helping? How can you help this person? Right.
Yes.
But back to storytelling. This is my passion. This is like who I am at my core. Something I haven't mentioned though, is that I actually come from the entertainment industry originally, and worked in a part of the industry that is very formulaic and very commercial, particularly the TV movie space. So it's all about, if any of you are familiar with Hallmark movies and Disney Channel movies, like it's always the same formula, essentially, right? And you just kind of try to find a unique flavor to it, a unique perspective, or just slightly different scenario or setting even. So when it comes to your brand storytelling, it starts with you. It starts with your story, why you're even here. When I work with clients, sometimes this is the hardest part for folks because we think very surface level, like, okay, I went to this college and I studied this and then I got this job and I really love writing, or I really love language and I love wellness. And so this is how I got into this. But I'm always looking for the deeper layers. What is the through line in your story? So I think of how I write movies, and I do still write some movies actually. So I think of the main characters, and the main characters are you and your audience. And we already talked about that, which is like thinking of your values, what you stand for, your audience, that very specific person you're talking to. When it comes to business and brand storytelling, the main lead, like I compare this to a rom-com. Oftentimes in traditional rom-coms, we have the female lead who's like the main lead of the story. And then we have the male lead, right? In film and like on sets, we call it number 1 on the call list and number 2 on the call list. You are not number 1 on the call list. Your audience is. So always remembering to center your audience in your storytelling. So even when you're writing your brand story, how can your audience envision themselves in it? How does it pull them in and help them feel like, oh, this is also my story, or this is where I belong? So always starting with the lead characters, you and your audience, but then thinking about, what is the purpose of this story? What's my through line? What's the bigger theme to this? Think of like your brand mission and vision. And then every story you tell under that should move that mission forward. I think too often we get caught up these days now, and like storytelling's become a very buzzy word. Like, I got to tell a new story. I got to figure out how to tell all different kinds of stories, but you really don't. There's only like 6 or 7 stories, but it's your perspective that makes them unique. And then the like sub stories you can tell, you don't have to tell a million different stories or find a new story every day. If you think about what are the common stories you often tell about your life or like related to your business? For example, I went to law school. I worked in entertainment. I also came from country music first. And I often share like very specific stories from my film and entertainment experience. What really led me to what I'm doing now is I was working on all these scripts, all female driven stories, and getting frustrated because I would see dialogue or scenarios that I thought no woman would say this or think this or want this to happen or do this. And then I realized most of these scripts were written by older white men. So the fact that we aren't even telling our own stories shows just how much our own image of ourselves can be distorted too, because of, you know, the entertainment we consume and the stories we read.
And then
And
how those shift culture.
yes,
Then again, like that
exactly.
language of shifting the culture, and then perhaps we thinking, oh, we should think that way. We should aspire to that. We should try to emulate that language and say that,
Yes,
when in fact
exactly.
it's very foreign from our own experience.
Yeah. And this is a story I share regularly, but sometimes from different angles. And it's also all okay to repeat yourself because, as you and I know from Gen Chem, repetition is what does she say? Repetition is the mother of mastery.
Yes.
Yeah. People do need to hear things repeatedly. What I will say is they don't necessarily need to hear them verbatim. It is about being strategic. As you know, I'm also on this expanded mission now to try to support candidates running for election this year and over the next few years. What triggered me to do that was actually Kamala Harris's presidential campaign. And yes, she had like 107 days to do it. So there was a short time period. But one of the things I learned from her book was that they purposely repeated speeches, which is not uncommon. But I remember watching different news clips and just hearing the same thing and wondering, why is she repeating it exactly? Like it feels scripted instead of actually
Authentic.
Yeah. They took that repetition is the mother of mastery idea literally. It's not so much like repeating to the point you're robotic, but more like repeating for emphasis. And that is something I check throughout posts or stories that I'm writing. Is there repetition that helps emphasize and tell the story better? Or is it just repetitive? For me, maybe because I'm a writer, every day something happens. I'm like, oh, that reminds me of something I can share. That gives me an idea. But I know for a lot of folks, they almost get paralyzed thinking, okay, what story should I tell here? Do I have interesting stories? And remember, your stories don't have to be flashy. One of my favorite stories is one of my clients. It was really hard trying to figure out like how to tell her story in a way that made her stand apart from others in her industry, because she's a fascinating woman, but she just tells me the facts and I'm looking for something deeper. And it wasn't until her head of marketing told me a story about her buying a fax machine, just a single fax machine for the business. And that's when like their sales exploded. And they'd already been in business for 10 years, but she came in and took over from her husband who was leading it before then. And that fax machine might seem like uninteresting or not even like that exciting. But if you know this person, she's resourceful, she knows how to get things done and she does it. And then great things happen. And it was just a perfect little illustration of how she gets things done. And so don't think too hard about all the different stories. What I do is I actually have 5 key areas of impactful storytelling, including your brand story, your areas of expertise, but not just directly related to your profession. But also, for example, right now, my profession is in marketing, messaging strategy, right? But I often bring in a lot of what legal writing taught me, what legal thinking taught me, and how that makes me a better writer, my experience in country music and film and television. Or sometimes it's someone's hobby that adds value to their expertise. And then also stories that show how their values are lived in action. So we're not just saying, these are my values. They're not just like words that sound good, but these are actually ingrained into our very being and everything we do. And then also the life-changing stories or the things that had great impact on your life. For some, it's motherhood. One of my clients, he hitchhiked across the country once, and the talent acquisitions executive, it was a way to show his genuine interest in people too, because he got to learn so much about people and met so many different kinds of people. And then the last one is issues you care about. Most of my clients, like we've talked about, they're equity driven or they care about something, even if it's not directly related to your business, share those because I think it's important to share the causes that we care about and why we do the work we do to support those causes. So those are like the 5 key areas of storytelling I tend to focus on: your brand story and like pulling sub stories from those. And then your expertise, areas of expertise, core values, life changing, impactful moments, and then the causes and issues you care about.
Justine, I am so grateful that you said yes and for our conversation, because I learned so much. I'm going to start thinking about these 5 areas of stories too. So for those of you who are in my newsletter, you might see it and you may know now where it comes from. And how can people find you if people want to work with you, if they want to be in your world? What are the invitations that you have for them?
Yes, connect with me on LinkedIn, Justine Chang. And then my website, you can reach me through my website, redballoonstation.com. Book a virtual tea with me. I love meeting with and chatting with new people to see how we can really bring your brand and storytelling alive. I'm on Substack at Justine Chang. I'm also on YouTube, which is at Red Balloon Station. On YouTube, I have a little series called Spilling the Boba. Boba standing for bringing our brands alive. Yeah. And so you can get, juicy little tips there and insights. I do have a newsletter, so do sign up for the newsletter where I also share all my messaging insights and trends that I'm seeing, or like cultural commentary on these marketing trends and all that. I genuinely love what I do. I'm so excited to always talk about this and share what I'm learning to tell better stories that create more equitable culture.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Justine. And thank you all for listening. Until next week. And as we say in Argentina, ciao, ciao.
Ciao, ciao.
Original music by Gary Lapo. You can find all links in the show notes at languagealchemy.com. And I'm going to include all links for you to connect with Justine.